Hello everyone, Stelios here, your host of the Friers podcast and the founder and managing director of Friers. In today's episode, we're diving deep with the president of the National Federation of Fish Friers and the owner of Skipper's Fish Bar in Exton. It's a deep conversation where we cover a lot of ground, so get ready for some deep insights. This episode is brought to you by Friers Natural Gold Batter Mix, the ultimate secret to nailing that perfect flavour and texture for your fish and chips. With a blend of 2 premium British wheat flours, 2 unique raisin agents and a natural colouring, our batter mix guarantees that signature golden finish. The Friers Natural Gold Batter Mix ensures consistent superior results in every batch. Committed to quality, our mix contains no artificial flavours, no artificial colourings or preservatives, only the best because we believe that every bite should be exceptional. It's proudly milled in the UK using British wheat. Our bags are free from plastic and using only sustainable materials and again made in the UK. Our mix not only supports the local economy, but it also helps reduce environmental impact. Don't just take my word for it. Murray Watson left a 5-star review on Friers.shop saying, "It's a high quality, consistent batter that gives me a nice crispy finish every time." Visit Friers.shop for next day free delivery across mainland UK or ask your wholesaler or our wholesaler for the Natural Gold Batter Mix. Stay connected with what we're up to at Friers by following us on social media and joining our mailing list. The link will be in our episode show notes. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to share it with friends on social media. And if you like this episode, others in the industry may like it too. If you have a moment, do us a big favour and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Your feedback gives us more visibility. Thanks for tuning in and let's keep the conversation going. Andrew, welcome to the Friers podcast.
Morning, Stelios.
Great to have you on again.
Oh, great to be back.
So, many will know that you are the president of the National Federation of Fish Friers, but you're also the owner of Skipper's in Exton. Uxton, have I said that right?
You've got it right. You did better than most do, so everyone struggles with that.
I had a lad working for me for a long time from Lancashire, so I've heard it all before, Filed and Uxton and all of this stuff. I've heard it all, so I feel like I'm from the area. How's your shop doing, mate?
Turnover-wise, we're still up there. I think I've always pitched at the quality end of it. I've always thought that's the right way to go, and I'm definitely the most expensive in my area, and because I want to serve good stuff and charge for it. So I've always been at that side of it. So I think my customers are probably a little bit less price sensitive. So we're still holding up. Margins is definitely squeezed. Obviously, I've got energy bills that are twice what they once were. Fish is starting to go up slightly, and obviously the potatoes at the moment. So there's a few challenges there, and obviously wages went up the other week, so that's another challenge. And with the industry role, I am quite heavy on the wages because I've got staff in the shop. I've got a manager to pay, and my shop's kind of in the middle of the industry. It's not one of the high turnover shops. It's really a shop that should be owner operated and run most shifts. But obviously with the industry role, I've got to have that manager there, and she is great, and she takes a lot of pressure off. But that does add a few more challenges for me. But overall, I'm just pleased people are still coming through the door, and fish and chips seems to be as popular as ever. But talking to other shops up and down the country, I think it's very dependent what area you're in and how affluent the area is. I think there's definitely shops out there that are really struggling at the moment, and we can never be complacent. You've got to keep pushing forward and keep trying different things, and something that might work in my shop might not work in their area, and vice versa. So it's just about trying different ideas and sharing ideas between each other.
Yeah. What are you hearing from the potato guys and the potato farmers?
Well, I don't do a lot of buying direct because, as you know, I use pre-prepared chips. I used to obviously be in that industry. There's definitely, more increases on the way. At the start of the year, I was told that we'll pay more for potatoes, but we probably won't see the highs that we saw last year. They'll just stay higher on average throughout the year. But and the job's getting talked up now, isn't it? You can see it on social media. You can see some of the people in the potato industry and farmers commenting on social media. So we could see the £30 a sack or close to that. That's the
You
worry at
know,
the moment.
when they say that though, like a part of me thinks, are they talking it up? So when it gets to 20, for argument's sake, which isn't probably far off from where we are at the moment, I think. I'm seeing a lot of reports of 15, 16. So 20 is not inconceivable. Do you think it's almost like, well, there could be 30, so be happy with 20? Do you think that's why they throw out that big number sometimes?
There's always an element to that, and obviously farmers. I mean, it's quite right that farmers earn enough money to continue growing their crop. Otherwise, they're going to start growing crops, different crops in the next season, and not grow as many potatoes, which we are seeing. But I think there is an element of they are in there to make money. It is a business, and they do kind of try and inflate the prices a little bit as well. They say, and maybe forewarn us of what potentially might happen if it's not quite as bad. You feel a little bit better, don't you, as you say? So, but I think the days of £6, £7 a sack potatoes are definitely gone forever. I don't think we'll ever see sub £10. I think they seem to be this year, especially. They never really dropped substantially. The big drop from where they were, but they didn't go down to the price they usually do. And I think that's probably what we're going to see going forward. And I think we're just going to factor that into our plans for a business.
Yeah, you could be right. You could. I think it's so different. Like I see a lot of reports, and I talk to a lot of wheat farmers, but it's different because wheat's very sort of like, no one's really growing specific wheat. Or if they are, it's the other way around to potatoes. So, specific wheat, if you're using, let's say, a high protein one, it's usually lower volume. It goes hand in hand. Whereas the majority of what we all use is what is a general wheat, which is really good quality. You can use it for everything. So the abundance goes there. But I guess if you flip that on its head, it's the opposite way around with potatoes, because we don't just use it. Well, fish and chip shops don't just use a general potato. It needs to be a chipping variety. So I think, and because I often see a lot of comments on the group saying, oh, well, Tesco or Aldi sell potatoes for X, but they're not being stored. They're literally taken out the ground, maybe stored to be cleaned, and they're probably sold pretty fast. Whereas, the amount of fogging and CIPC or peppermint or whatever it is that they use these days to keep that product in stores, I think that probably no one probably realised that. And on top of the fact that you touched on it as well, farmers like to moan. And my landlord is a farmer, and I mean, he could moan about anything. Like, I mean, if it was an Olympic sport, he'd get gold. I told him today. So I think there is that element of, but I think farmers always sort of feel hard done by, and I get that too, because they're grafters, and if they didn't go out and do what they did, we wouldn't have certain things. So I think they probably feel like they don't get the merit they deserve from that.
I think that's why the Isle of Ely Open Day is pretty good, because it gets the fish and chip shops mixing with the growing side, and we get to see a little bit of the behind the scenes and the investment and the cost that goes into it. And it is a big gamble for them. If they lose on a year, they lose big, but if they win on a year, they can win big as well. And it's.
I think a cynic in our industry, well, every industry is full of cynics, would say they want us there so they can tell us how they're lifting the prices and why. And I guess there is that. If you flip that on its head, they are doing that. They're priming you by educating you. And I think I remember early on when we had our website, the first website, we used to put market reports on there. And it was in the early days of writing, and I didn't want to give any opinion. I just wanted to put the facts there and let people decide what they wanted to decide. And someone came back to me and said, the reason why no one's talking about it is because they think you're priming them for an increase. And I think the cynic's mind thinks, if you're telling me something, it's because you want to change my opinion. And it is true, because we do want to change someone's opinion. Just like if you were telling your customer in your shop, let's say, why a certain thing costs a certain amount, you are trying to change their formed opinion. So everyone seems very resistant to changing their opinion.
But if you get the shops with the background knowledge on potatoes, they then convey that to their customers as well. So, they can talk to the customers about the product, which adds value to what they're doing. And so I do think
Mm.
it's always worth learning about the different supply sectors. And obviously, I've been lucky enough to go on a few vessels as well to look at the fishing side of things. And you always learn something. And it's something that you can pass on to your customers and add value to your product. Your customers are quite interested in things like that.
Yeah, I think so. Well, let's hope so. And obviously, I think customers are very accustomed to rising prices now. I think it's been everywhere. They're used to it, and they've probably seen it fall back a little bit. They're not going to see it fall back in our industry because I think too many things have happened. In order for things to stay where they are. But yeah, it's just what it is.
I think we've been too cheap for too long as well as a product, and then there is the argument. We do work on volume, and we've to accept that. That we're always going to be got to be priced well. But I do think for the constituent items in the portion of fish and chips, it is they're expensive proteins, fish. So we have, and the equipment's expensive. So excuse me, I've got a frog in the throat. The equipment's expensive as well. So you can't be too cheap. You've got to make a profit.
I think one thing you guys seem to be dealing with as a federation as well is hopefully is trying to teach people how to tot up their margins and calculate those things, because I think one thing I see sometimes is that, and I think I've seen a lot of fish and chip shop owners do this, and probably a lot of business people do it. They always look at what other people are doing and they'll say, oh, what's he charging? Well, I've got to be 10p behind it or 10p above it, depending whether they think they're better or worse. Or not worse, no one's going to admit to being worse, but it depends. They might want to chip away at that customer as well, so they'll be a bit cheaper. But you don't know what faith have you got that person's done his calculations correctly. What if he just went to the guy down the road from him? I'm suggesting that everyone's male, but I'm not. I mean male and female. So, I think for me, it's like we've got no faith in the fact that, we don't know. Like if I came to copy you, Andrew, I don't know that you know your prices. You probably better than most because of your role outside of the fish and chip shop. But for the most part, I don't know. But I just feel like that needs to be corrected. So people need to sit down and look at their proper GP and say, okay, here's where I need to be. And, I need to work around this. I think if they did that, they'd probably realise that actually it can probably hopefully be profitable, and they reset things. But it's hard if you're already trading, I'd imagine. If you're already trading, that's different.
I think people fall into the fish and chip industry. It's not. I mean, obviously the family ties, but even with my family ties, when I was going through education, I had no intention of going into fish and chips, and not always going into it with a business mind. They carry on doing things they've always done, and if there's people coming through the door and there's money left over at the end of the week, they think that's great. But what events the last few years have shown us is we've got to be a little bit more professional and look at a cost, look at the portion sizes, and I do think the expensive potatoes is having an effect on the shops that serve the big portions. I know in my area they've stopped doing. There's a shop near me that their large portion used to feed 4 or 5, and they've stopped doing them completely, and they're just doing a regular portion of chips, which is still large, but it is having an effect. And so I think that's going to be the way going forward. I think, as I say, potatoes are not going to be as cheap as they were, so businesses need to start looking at that.
I don't see a problem with having, for example, a 14-ounce fish. I know this sounds silly, or a 30-ounce bag of chips. It's just charging accordingly and call it the right thing. So, if you're going to do something like that, it could be a family meal, let's say, and charge accordingly. I think that's, for me, it's always the naming and the pricing. But again, everyone's got to look at their business model. Some people may have low rent, high mortgage, whatever. There's so many different factors at play here. So yeah, it's interesting, really. There's so many things going on. One thing I wanted to ask, and you just touched on it, is how are you dealing personally with the wage increases?
Well, I put my prices up when the increase came in, and it's probably my largest increase. I think 45, 50p I put on fish and chips. So it was.
What's that in percentage terms, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I'd have to work it out. I'd have to. I'm not going to calculate in front of me, but I just decided I needed to go a bit strong. I knew what was coming this year, and I would just under the £10 fish and chips, which in this area nobody's broke through the £10 barrier at the moment. So
okay, you mentioned your area a couple of times. Like, give to those listeners who don't know the area sort of in, what is it like?
Well, Lancashire and Yorkshire historically, the industrial areas. So there's a lot of terraced houses with fish and chip shops on the terraced houses. We've started seeing in the last few years some bigger shops opening up. Quite a few of those do operate at a quite high turnover. They're probably cash only as well, so there's a story in there somewhere. We've had increased competition. Some of the smaller shops have gone out of business, but the bigger shops that have opened up have taken that trade. There's one in the town centre that's huge on the main street, and there was another shop round the corner which is shut down. It's up for sale now, but the owner shut it down. He's come up to retirement age. He's sold his original shop, and he's just trying to market that and sell it. But whether anyone will take it on, in a town centre, probably the wrong end of the high street, I can't see anyone buying it and using it as a fish and chip shop. Where my shop is, I'm in a little village just outside of a town. There's about 7,000 people live in the village. A lot of commuters there. Last time I looked at about 70% self-employed. A lot of retired people there. Nice houses, so it's people that appreciate quality. So for me, I've been very lucky that I've ended up I've had shops in different towns and different parts of this area as well. But I've just felt lucky with Exton, and I've been there 17 years, so I think it'd probably be my last shop. I don't think I'll do another one.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, hopefully it's no time soon. Hopefully you're not out of the industry yet. But I think I think there was one argument I had, not an argument, let's say a way of passing on this increase. And I think when they launched this, when they announced they were doing this wage increase, the government, although they don't do it, they just tell you to do it. Yeah, but when they did announce it, I said to one of my customers, why don't you put your prices up now? No one's really going to notice right now. A little bit, don't go crazy. And then in April, when that time comes, because we had a good 4 or 5 month run up to this thing, so then everyone's forgotten about it again, and then you do it again, and you just say, well, actually, wage increases. And I find that consumers feel quite relaxed about wage increases. Like, if they see that their fish and chips has gone up, or petrol's gone up, whatever it is has gone up at the supermarket, if you was to directly link it to wage increases, they do see that as a good thing. Consumers are like, oh, actually, no, staff need, I think there's a very strong work ethic in the UK where, well, people respect the work ethic. We'd wish more people work, but that's a different story. That's for another podcast. But I think in terms of people that do work, I think people want them to get paid fairly. And I think it always makes you look better as a business owner, I think.
All interviews, I always try and say that when they talk about increased costs and we say wages go up, I always say, but people should be paid well. Working in hospitality, it's unsociable hours, it's hard work. You're not just stood behind a counter. It's quite physical, it's quite mentally tiring, and especially on a Friday night when the real busy periods, and people should be paid well for that. And my argument with government is, just need to make sure that we can afford to do it. That's always been the argument.
Well, I think in some ways, I don't think that's the government's problem. I think they sort of see that as, we've done our bit, now do your bit. And I think, and that's any government. I think, did you see in California, they've now got $20, $20 an hour minimum wage, or living wage, whatever they want to call it, for fast food workers. And everyone's shocked that the fast food prices are going to go through the roof. And you think, well, what were you expecting at $20, which is about, 16, 18, 17 quid UK. So I think that's probably, I think low wages are gone. Low wages are gone. And the fact is, we knew this with Brexit. And I think both sides of that argument said different things. I do think that we sort of knew that, well, because they did say wages would go up. And I think at the time it sounded great. Wages are going to go up. And obviously, and it is great, because people should be paid better. But I think maybe people just weren't ready for it. I think, it's interesting. Yeah.
There were other factors as well going on, wasn't there, with Ukraine, and, everything seemed to hit at once, didn't it? So.
Well, and I guess that is standard. It's pretty much like nothing ever gets done in a vacuum. Like, there's always something else. But no one remembers that from the other side too. So they won't say they won't say, well, this Brexit deal didn't get done because of COVID, because they forget that all of those things sort of happened at exactly the same time. But no, I think if anything, it just, it is what it is. And I think it will get better. But everything's in the pot at the moment, and nothing seems to be getting better for many at the moment. And I think, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. You mentioned cash only. Do you think that's something the government need to fix? Because in my mind, as a consumer, I just wished everybody accepted everything. If I had a tenner in my pocket, I'd want to pay with that. I probably wouldn't actually, because I wouldn't have the coins in my pocket. But I'd probably just give them a tip at that point. But you know, if you know I had a card on me, I'd want to pay by card. I wouldn't want to be penalised whichever way I went as a consumer.
Yeah, I agree. For many years, I've said I've still not heard a legitimate reason for a business not to take card nowadays. It's not expensive. The technologies there, even on a mobile unit, there's technology for the internet or linking it with your phone, or you can get the Starlink internet. I mean, I know you've got it at your place, haven't you? So there's all sorts of solutions, and I just think you're limiting your customers. I'm on a parade of shops, and there's a pizza shop, there's an Indian, there's a Chinese, there's a deli at lunchtimes. People get out of the car if they've not got cash on them. There's no cash machine there. They're going to go somewhere where they can pay with card if you don't offer that facility. I'm now electronic payments, not just card, but electronic payments is settled down at 80% of my turnover. It's I couldn't imagine not having it. But I'm going to the bank less for change. You know, I love it. I can't remember the last time I got change from the bank. I've just recycle everything I've got. Obviously, I get a bit of change myself, and then collection boxes in the shop go in, and you know, it's made life a lot easier, and I've got less money knocking around the house at the weekend, so I certainly won't be without card payments.
Well,
It was actually Bill Colbeck that taught me into it many years ago up at one of the Colbeck shows, and you know, at that time there were very few shops offer it. Obviously, COVID changed that, and most places do, but there's still plenty of places that have got a cash only sign. And I think government, there's very little chance of removing the headline rate of VAT. They might do. I had a meeting with Kevin Hollingray, the small business minister, a few weeks ago. I invited Dencas as well, and the Caribbean Collective, so it showed that the independent hospitality sector are working together, and we've all got the same issues. And I think the headline rate, it may happen, but an easier one for them to tackle is making sure that they stop the fraud on the other end of it and give a level playing field, because at least then it is businesses living or dying on their own endeavours, or maybe a little bit of bad luck and location and things like that. But at the moment, we do have a situation where it's more difficult to survive if you're doing everything by the book. And I think that's something government need to tackle, and should tackle. Morally, they should tackle that. It's a bit, if they know there's an issue there, that they should do everything they can to, they're setting the rules, they should then police it.
Did I ever tell you about, I went to a restaurant in Leeds one night, probably about a year and a half ago. So I may have told you, I may not have told you. And I was with a friend who lives in Leeds, not far from NFF, around the corner. And we went in, we ate, no mention of no card anywhere, so we're eating. So in my mind, I'm paying by card, because there's no mention of it not being, And we had a bit of a blowout, because why not? And he comes over, gives us the receipt, the receipt to pay. And I said, can you bring over the card machine? And you could see he looked all sheepish, like, oh, sorry, sir, we don't have a card machine, blah, 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 the costs. And obviously, you're telling the wrong person, because, I know that the costs are low. And so he goes, there's, this was a February, by the way, as well. And a February in Leeds, or anywhere in England, to be fair, is rainy. So he goes, there's a co-op over the road. So I walk across the road to the co-op, like, getting rained on, like, and like I'm I'm just in a bad mood, and I just, I go back and I pay him. It was like 80 quid or something, 76 quid or something, and I pay him, and I got it wrong. I must have not looked at the receipt properly, and I got it wrong. In my annoyance, I got it wrong, so I have to go back to the bloody machine, get another tenner out or whatever it was. And he goes, I hope to see you again. And I just said to him really nicely but firmly, I said, you're not going to see me again. Like, it's just not going to happen. And he's like, why so? Was there a problem with your food? I said, there's a problem with the fact that you didn't mention that there was no, that it was cash only. I said, I've got to go outside and get rained on. I've been out twice. I says, I don't understand how you just don't see that's a problem. Like, and bear in mind, like, while we were chatting, because I think he had some sort of connection to Cyprus or whatever. He wasn't Cypriot, but he sort of, he had enough to talk about. And he was sort of saying how business is hard and it's a struggle. And I was saying to him, like, you're telling us over this whole meal how trade's hard, and you don't even accept cards. You peed off a customer to go outside. And I think that people don't realise that people just want convenience. Like, the moral of that story is that I could have just tapped the card and paid him and probably left him a nice tip and left on good terms. And And although Ryan in accounts would have gone mad if I left him a tip, but the point is that are we making those people that are doing the cash only? Are they actually making their customers' life hard? But again, I think there's a sub segment of people out there, Andrew, that think that there's a conspiracy theory, and that people are trying to stop the use of cash, and that government, this, that, the other, authoritarian, all that stuff. And I just think, give customers the choice. That's it for me.
Don't put barriers up. But I mean, I imagine people have conspiracy theories when they're getting rid of the barter system and cash came in. I just think it's the way things are going. And if people think that it's about control, I've always said, ask yourself why you drag yourself out of bed on a Monday morning to go and work to pay your mortgage. You're controlled by cash. Money is a control mechanism. You're fined if you do something wrong, so that's your punishment. So I do think cash it's life tokens, isn't it? That's essentially what they are.
Yeah, it's true. And look, from the point of having less cash on site, you're sleeping better at night. That is just, and I don't even mean it on the dodgy sense. It's just that you've removed the one of the main reasons of being robbed. And I'm convinced that a lot of people are massively, woefully underinsured for how much cash they keep on site. And actually, if you were to press me deeper, I'd say that most people are uninsured anyway. They have insurance, but they're uninsured for lots of different reasons. So
definitely. I think I used to say, well, it was strange going out without any cash on you. Now I don't take my cards out because I've got my watch, I've got my phone, and you've no limit with or a much higher limit with your Apple phone. So you can just pay and tap your phone on. Great on the underground. So for me, it's the way to go. But I can see why people do like cash, and you can spend a little bit too much when you're just tapping. You don't really. It's a good thing when you're on the receiving end of it in a shop, because people do spend a little bit more. But you've got more control over your finances. You've got cash in your pocket, but then again, you can lose it, can't you? So
there is a huge benefit. We'll wrap this one up in a minute, sort of bore people about this, but there is a huge benefit with accessibility and disabilities when it comes to paying with card and Apple Pay. My dad had a severe stroke 2 years ago, and he gets really annoyed because when we go out to eat, I pay, which pisses him off endlessly. He wants to pay, and he figured out that actually when the credit card terminal comes, the guy brings it over, he just tapped it with his phone, and he was like buzzing that he could pay with it. So now obviously he wants to pay for everything. That's his thing now. Again, he's back to normal, back to being a dad. Yeah. So if you see, he's physically impaired to some degree, and yet he could still pay for a meal, because so I think that it's empowering, and again, you said, and this is not hearsay, it is a well supported fact that consumers spend more when they use a card. So yeah, I've got a couple of questions here, but I'm going to ask them differently. They're not a trick. It's just to get to the bottom of something. So, What do you think at the moment are your members' biggest concerns?
As I say, I think that it's a difficult one to answer just with one answer, because there's different shops in different areas that got different pressures. I do get a few calls about shops that are going under. There's a few that phone me quite often. They're trying different things and they're struggling to make ends meet, and at least they're trying and not just giving up. So I think the cost of ingredients and not being able to sell at a high enough price, they're worried about the competitors. And I think it's about, in some cases, who's got the deepest pockets when you've got a few shops in an area and they're all seem to be on a race to the bottom, or nobody wants to make the first move. So I think that's one of the biggest problems. I think coastal shops and tourist shops struggle with staff. To be honest, I'm probably much the same because it's quite an affluent village. I've found this year more than ever, I think I've had 4 young members of staff that have got exams coming up that have decided to either take a period of leave or just to leave the business, which I might have had one every couple of years in the past. You get the odd one that wants some extra tuition or needs to concentrate a little bit more on their exams. So I'm finding I'm struggling for staff a little bit more. I think so that's a big challenge for a lot of businesses. Obviously, seasonal shops, they get that every year, and I think it's becoming more and more difficult, especially if some of the South Coast or Whitby, where there's very little unemployment, and they've lost the migrant workers. The Poles that used to come over just don't come over. So I think that's definitely a big challenge. And then, as I said, the fraud side of things, because that's undermining a lot of businesses, and I think I do have a lot of members that get in touch about that. One thing that seems to be becoming more and more of an issue is insurance. Because businesses are finding it difficult to get insurance without installing a fire alarm. I think it's a P1, isn't it? Hardwired fire
Yeah.
alarm or a suppressant system. And then when you actually explain to a high turnover shop about, well, look at it this way, because I know some businesses that have had fires and the amount of hassle and stress to try and get things sorted and they're just not getting paid out. If you've got a system that will prevent that happening and you can be open the next day, then it's worth investing. If you've got a shop that's turning over 20, 30,000 pounds a week, then it's worth spending the money. The big fear is that that's going to start coming down. They're asking the big shops to put suppressant systems in over the next few years. I can see more and more shops being brought into that, and it will be too much money for a lot of shops to be able to afford. So
I guess the barrier to entry in this industry was always pretty low. Like, you know, you could find a shop for sale for like 20 grand. You didn't need training. Well, we'll focus on the word need later on. But, you know, you could just, in your mind, be self-employed tomorrow. But I think what you're sort of building a picture of here is the barrier to entry is starting to become higher. And I guess there's pros and cons to that. The pros are that not anybody is just going to take on a shop near you. I guess you're going to see some shops not being redeveloped if that's the case. You know, especially if you think Lancashire or at least the Northwest has a high concentration of shops, especially down little side streets. And, you know, I think I remember someone saying to me that the likes of VA Whitley, Tea Quality and Northwest companies do more drops than people in the Northeast. So I think that tells you there's more shops. So, you know, do you ever see people just saying, you know what, we're not gonna, you know, this front terrace, this house at the front and a terrace street, it was a house, shall I say, that is a little dinky chip shop, and I don't mean dinky as a negative, I just mean small. Are they going to say, you know what, it's not worth it? It's not worth it. I've got to put fire suppression and fire alarms, and I've got to have a brand new frying range that's up to today's code. Is it worth it?
grease traps and the amount of training, a low turn up. If you look on business transfer agents, there's still shops going for £20,000. I don't know who's buying them because I do think their future is limited. I've got a shop in the next village that I let somebody open it up. It was closed for 18 months. I let somebody open it up in October. He's not doing any money. He's not doing very well. I might be taking that back on myself, and it's not something I'm looking forward to. But I just want to see that. If I do it myself, at least I know if it's got a good chance of surviving or not. There's not much competition in the village, so it's got a chance. But I do think these shops at that level are going to find it very difficult going forward. And in my position, I've got to look at the industry and where it's heading, which is some of what I've said to government. We need to protect these independent businesses, the small businesses. Otherwise, they're going to give up. All the operators in the middle of the industry. You've got your long established shops, but people like myself who've no children, I've no one to pass it on to. At some point, I'm going to think, why am I working every weekend and having all these hassles? And I got a bad review on Christmas Day, which was somebody that's probably had a drink looking at it because they gave me a 5-star review. And all these things add up to stress on your life, which if you just got a job, you wouldn't have. And I think,
however,
go on.
Sorry, just thinking about this. Where do you draw the line? You know, we chose to be self-employed, me included, just a different business. You know, do we want the government to also start telling us what to sort of protect us completely? You know, because I think that is a fine line, isn't it? Like for me, if the market sort of shows that you're being squeezed out of a certain market, they could close that business and turn it into a residential or whatever and move on to a slightly bigger unit if they wanted to stay in the industry, let's say, or something that they deemed as more viable. And again, I don't want to say that someone's small shop somewhere isn't viable, because there's actually lots of small shops that are doing really well. But if somebody was really struggling and they've tried everything, we can't expect the government to step in and help every single case, can we?
No, definitely. I mean, one phrase I've heard in government circles has been natural attrition, but that's not always what we're getting at the moment. So I think they just need to engage with industry and just try and work with the various associations. We all talk, and we're a good sounding board for government, just to try and make sure that the playing field's level and fair. And I think that's all we can hope for. At the end of the day, you're in business and some will win, some will lose, but you've got to make sure that the rules that they're abiding by mean that the ones that are following them have got the best chance. And I think that's all we can hope for from government.
Of those concerns, which do you think? So it's slightly different. Which do you think are the biggest concerns? Or even in order, if you can't choose one, like where would you know?
I think staffing's a problem. I do. That's why in the Fish and Chip Awards we came up with Employee of the Year. We've got the Dry White Young Fish Fryer of the Year. Just try and show that it isn't the industry that many perceive it to be, where you're working hard and you're not valued by the business. Any business is nothing without its team. And we need to celebrate them. So I think employment and attracting people into the industry and keeping people in the industry, it's an industry where people pass through when they're in education, and then you get a few that stick with it. But on the whole, you've got a transient workforce, and I just think changing the impression or shouting about the role that hospitality plays with these people, that they go on to different careers when they finish education, but they've learnt skills and from being in hospitality and gain confidence, and we do perform a good role. So I think shouting about that's one thing that can help that. But obviously, organisations like ourselves, we try and provide training, but a lot of it is on the job training. It's down to the owners of the business. We're trying to, as an organisation, just lead the owners to look after the workforce more. So we're looking at mental health training for employees, or for the operators, so that they can spot issues. Financial planning. We've just joined up with a company whose parents used to have fish and chips at 149. A guy called Nick Gilbertson, who's offering financial planning for operators, but also we can do things for employees as well. And I think we need to look at nurturing our teams and protecting our teams and valuing our teams more, and that way we'll keep that steady flow of people coming through, and we'll change the impression of working in the fish and chip shop. The shops are much better now, aren't they? They're much more attractive. You don't come out of work smelling the same, and the hours aren't as bad as they used to be, because a lot of shops aren't open until midnight, 1 o'clock. So for me, that, and then, as I said, the making businesses or the playing field viable and fair, that's my biggest focus, because we've got to protect the future of the industry as well, and it is going to change. Businesses are going to fail, but what we don't want is to lose that individuality of hospitality businesses. I go many chain restaurants, and you have some great meals, but when I go to an independent restaurant, I usually have more of a memorable meal. When I go to, there's an Italian in Leeds that I started going to, which is fantastic, and I'll let you know which one it is after. I'll not give him a plug. You
can say now if you want to pop in.
Well, there's one called Franco's, and he's in his 80s, and he used to work at the Savoy, and honestly, it's fantastic. I know Caroline Murphy goes there as well from Wetherby Whaler.
Okay.
It's a great restaurant. That's a memorable meal. When I've been to one of the chains, Italian, it's all right. Nothing offensive, and I do think we've got to think about that. I think the independent businesses have got different pressures to the big businesses. A lot of the big chains, they'll change their equipment every 2 years to write tax off, and they're not even worried about selling it on. They just give it to the engineers that are fitting the installs, and they sell them on eBay. And it's small businesses can't, on the whole, do that, and we end up buying that second-hand equipment. And I think.
But small business does also get a lot of support from government, and I think that I don't want that to be set aside or ignored. So, for example, just trying to think off the top of my head, a small business would get less admin. They get a VAT threshold where they can work within a little bit of a run up there. They don't have to charge for carry bags sometimes, or at least there was a certain wage number before where I think if you have 200 staff, you have to do something else. Small business doesn't have to do calorie displaying. They don't. They've got less employment rights to some degree, less stringent employment rights. They get free pay software. I'm trying to think now. There's loads, and then obviously you got small business relief, small business rate relief. So I think sometimes small business gets into the mindset of saying we're not big, we don't get support, and I guess you aren't big, and obviously a larger business. Let's say I'm just trying to think of one that's big. Let's say Nando's. I've got no ill will against Nando's, but they're a big business. They do have the benefits of scale. You know, they're big. They've got HR departments, marketing departments, you name it, everything. Area managers, and obviously a small business doesn't, but they don't also need all of those things. And hopefully they've got a trade association that does some of those things for them. So I think sometimes we've got to be careful in my mind not to frame it as small business, oh poor me. Do you get me?
Yeah, but I'm not saying that at all. I mean, you look at our industry, we've nation's favourite takeaway. We've got a lot of positives, but we have to protect that independence. For me, it's not just about small bits. It's that the character of the industry that comes from every shop being different. The passion that quite often you see on social media arguments about which is the best fish and chip shop in a town, because everyone likes things slightly differently, but everyone's got the favourite, and I think that would be something tragic if we lost that and everything
Oh, I
became
agree with that.
sanitized and the same. And I think so. For me, that's what I spend a lot of time trying to get across to government and working with the other trade associations as well. That because we are such a fragmented sector, it's difficult. I think government do want to help. The sense tests a lot of the decisions against small businesses. That's one of the things they do. So they are keen to do something, and they are keen to work with us. They just don't know how, and we've got to provide that conduit
Yeah.
of we're here. We can do real time reaction to anything you're thinking about, and give you we can give you access to our members and get your data. But we've got to feel like you're working with us. And during the run-ups to the budgets, I've sent a lot of surveys out on behalf of the Department of Business, and which has gone into the Treasury, and then nothing happens. And there will come a point where businesses think, well, what's the point, because nothing's happening. But government does want to work with us. They are, the civil servants are great, and they'll probably be a constant if there is a change of government, which looks likely this year. So we're just building relationships with them, and hopefully going forward we'll have more of a voice.
There's been a lot of talk about grease traps, and you just mentioned it as well. So why do you think that's a thing now? Like, because it wasn't a few years ago. Nobody spoke about grease traps. I don't think anyone ever mentioned it to me. So why do you think now it's becoming a thing?
I think the cost of blockages to the sewage system, it's something that all the water companies are trying to make this. You know what's going on with Thames Water at the moment with massive debts. They're just trying to plug any, for want of a better word, any holes they can, any leaks they can, and I think it is something they can target. They did employ the first two people from a water company was Southern Water, and the two guys came and met me in Leeds, and I could tell straight away they're ex-policemen, and that's so their enforcement team came from that policing background, but they don't go in too heavy-handed at first. They'll come along and give you a warning. But I think they started off. A lot of the restaurant chains and pub chains will have one when they build a new restaurant. They'll put it in the larger places. Well, and I think there's a lot of independent takeaways out there that just had no appreciation of, one, they don't think there's an issue because they've got an oil collection in the shop, and two, they didn't know the technology was there to try and tackle it. I was quite surprised when I got a GRU fitted, a grease removal unit fitted in my shop, how much it pulls out just from the washing up water. So we do all contribute towards it, and I just think the water companies are just trying to.
Isn't it? Wouldn't you think that it's better for them to prove to us that this industry, and I'll use all of hospitality, yeah, whether it's Indian takeaways, Chinese takeaways, fish and chip shops, hotels, restaurants, and so on. Wouldn't it be up to them to prove to us that they can see that there's a problem, and then they should then pick up the cost by saying, we'll fit it for you?
Well, I've said, I spoke at the it sounds like it was the European Greece forum in Liverpool a couple of years ago, and I said, no, you're saying that by everyone fitting grease traps, it's going to stop all this 180 million pounds a year they're spending on tackling blockages. I said, well, surely if you put 90 million pounds into subsidising grease traps, that would at least save you. You'd still be 90 million pounds better off, but no, you'd be helping these businesses comply. And I think that's probably an easier thing to achieve for us than getting them completely free. I think David Miller got one years ago from his local water company. So they've done trial areas and tried to see what impact that has. But I think it's very difficult for them to prove where grease is coming from, because it goes from a little pipe into a bigger pipe, and it's usually further down the system where it all starts collecting and block. And I think so. It's very difficult to show that it's just from our industry, but when you've got one of the GIUs fitted, you do see how much grease it does pull out the washing up. So there is definitely an issue there.
I think there is going to be grease. There's going to be starch. I think starch is probably a bigger problem, if I'm honest, because the amount of starch that's coming out of I've seen a little sink, just a little hand sink where you're washing batter and pre-dust off your hands. How that little sink has a problem, because you notice after a while it glugs and it goes really slow. And one of our customers was having a boil out, and he got a bucket of what was at the pan and stuck it down that sink, and it cleared it. And obviously it did run better. So. But I think that focusing on grease and proving grease, and also what they're not telling you is that it's probably not grease that's the problem. It's probably I'm not convinced that grease or starch it's going that down that far, because I'm convinced it'll be breaking down. And I have seen photos of fatbergs, but what's keeping these fatbergs together? Cotton buds, tissues, plastic. So it's people using a toilet as a disposal system. That's half the problem. So I feel like they're not actually targeting the issue. They're just making something chargeable, and they can raise the funds by saying, hey, chip shop, Chinese takeaway, hotel, or whoever, we're charging you X now. And I think that, for me, the burden should be on those to prove it, to say, and I know you say it's hard for them, but actually it should be their job. Like, that is their job physically to prove that. So yeah, I'm probably leaning towards, pushing them towards providing the equipment. But chances are then they'd be like, no, it's actually not that important, because they've got to pay for it, So, and also they're putting like, when the water gets to the other side, they're putting, I forgot what they call it now, algae and fat eating, a lot of natural
bacterial,
things, bacterial, antibacterial or bacterial even, so all of these things they're treating the water anyway. So in my mind, they're trying to charge us for basically a subsidy towards that. And so yeah,
when I used to do prep chips, I had a factory unit before it turned into Triple F chips. So I had a factory unit. I was doing batch processing, probably doing about 30 ton a week, and used to have. They came taking effluent every week. They came and took a sample from the drain and analysed it, worked out the percentage of suspended solids, and calculated the bill on the back of that. If they actually said to me at the time, if I was doing the same volume of potatoes behind my shop, they weren't interested. I think that's probably what's changed now. They've started going further down the chain, and they're now starting to look at the businesses and trying to tighten up on that. But I agree with you, starch is a big problem as well, and the solutions for that are basically an interceptor, aren't they? I know there's other things there, but
interceptor's not going to hold starch. I don't care what anybody says. Starch is starch. Like, I've seen them make starch in a factory, and nothing is stopping it. It's going to be everywhere because it's a powder that's finer than most things. So, again, it's just going to say, oh, you need an interceptor, but it's still letting things through that are less than 1 mil. And if it's not, we've tested interceptor technology, and we've just not seen anything. Yes, it holds back solids, and it holds back foam, but that's not your problem. Your problem is starch, and starch is under a millimetre thick. It's a micron size. So good luck trying to stop that going down the drain.
Well, at the factory we tried all sorts of things. We had a weir system, and that worked to some extent, but you still got some suspended solids in the water. So I agree with you. Without spending millions of pounds on a filtration system, which nobody could ever do in their own business, then you're always going to get some getting through.
So again, I think that's the problem. They'll just end up charging you for something rather than So have you given any thought to this proposal on Owen's Law yet?
Not really. I've not been looking at that side of it. It's usually Hugh Mantle, but
no, it looks like that's going to be another headache for the industry, to be honest. I think they're basically suggesting that even in lots of suggestions, but one of them is like even in a takeaway setting, that the staff member says, "Have you got any allergies?" And I think I'm sort of worried about and I've spoke to the family a little bit that's trying to push this, and I feel for them. Obviously their son died, but I think that we've written a couple of articles on it, but I think moving all the onus onto business people, I just think that, again, if you've got an allergy, you need to be telling people, not expecting everybody to run to your whim.
I agree. I mean, with Natasha's law, a lot of the change that I've made in my business, I put the sauces up at the time of serving, so I'm not having to label everyone. Only tartar sauce I've got labels for because we put those up before. And it's got to be practical. Things have to be practical in a business, and anything that delays serving, looking from the outside of the industry, you might not see that it's an issue. But when you look at a Friday night in a fish and chip shop and having to ask every customer if they've got any allergies, yeah, I agree that there has to be some onus placed onto the customer, definitely.
Well, recently, there was another chap that passed away recently, and he ordered a pizza with a friend, and he didn't ring the pizza shop. He just went online and Googled. It was a local pizza shop, so it wasn't a chain. And just Googled, would this? I think it was a tikka masala pizza. Would a tikka masala pizza have nuts in it? And he didn't ring the shop. At no point did he ring the shop, and it's tragic. Like that someone died from that. But at the same time, now there's going to be another push for the law, and so it's like, well, and I feel like all this friction just creates problems. And whereas I think if he'd rang up, and again, not trying to shame the person who passed away, but if they just rang up and said, look, I'm allergic to X, Y, and Z, okay, well, you can't have that pizza, have a barbecue chicken pizza or whatever. So yeah, it's a worry, that.
If that was me, I'd certainly be ringing up. If I knew I had a severe allergy, then something that could kill me, you would be. It's different if they're told it doesn't contain it and it actually does, and it's
yes, of course.
But if take every steps, I think maybe on both sides, the consumer has to take some responsibility as well. But we've got to make sure that our staff are well trained and when the information's there to hand. So I think it's unfair just to put it all on business, isn't it?
Without sounding old, I wonder if it's a generational thing. I wonder if you were allergic to something growing up, you would have had it drummed into you. Tell everyone, tell everyone that it matters to, not just anybody. But and I wonder if that's what's changed now, where everyone else now bends to the again, I don't want to sound too old and moany, but I think that seems to be some of that.
We're getting there anyway, aren't we? So
it's true.
The time will come when we could just sit there mourning.
No, exactly. Yeah, you quicker than me.
Slightly.
So, looking back at the spring budget, why were you disappointed?
I just thought there was an opportunity there, and I think we still may get that in an autumn statement. I think we need a bit of growth. It just feels that we're just floating along the bottom like a flat fish, and I don't know. Being in business, you want to be entrepreneurial, and everyone's just treading water at the moment. The nation feels like it's treading water, and it's just a bit depressing. And I think spring's a good time to. The planet's coming back, the Earth's coming back to life, isn't it? And it's a good time to kickstart things. And I know from talking to members that are struggling that, they're holding out for something to change. And I thought it was unlikely. I thought what we might have got is some kind of smoothing measures on VAT. So I thought we might get, more of a tiered system, or raising the threshold to take some of the smaller businesses out of it. But there was very little. I think for a business, there wasn't much at all, and there was not a lot to give a lot of hope, was there? So,
do you think that maybe we're expecting too much before an election, though, as well?
Well, I think they framed it that way, didn't they? It was going to be a tax given, and then things changed as the date got closer. And
do you not feel like that's a tactic of all government now, where they sort of release a few things to see what the perception is like, and it's almost like to see, well, we'll say this. I think one of the things was lowering, increasing inheritance tax, so that a lot less people would pay it, and they sort of threw this idea out there, and it's almost like, are they just watching what the papers say? And I do fear we've become a country that only listens to what the papers say.
Well, that happened all through COVID, didn't it? You get an announcement, but you didn't get the actual detail until a couple of days later when they saw what kind of pushback they were getting.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I do think that definitely goes on. But no, I think the Trust Kwarteng budget, it was badly delivered, and I think they probably went too far.
I think
the strategy for growth is right.
Yeah, they had the right thing in mind. Whether it was enough to scare everybody involved with it, it just didn't make sense. But I do think, and I know a lot of people probably won't give them a lot of credit for this, but the government we have at the moment has actually been quite steady. They have steadied the ship. It wasn't a while ago, every few weeks we had this bloody there was something always, wasn't there? Like, and then obviously within the 3 weeks that Liz Truss was in, we had like the most news we've ever had. And I do think they have got on with trying to get things right. And if we take them by their word, and not that they're being overly political, maybe I'm being naive here, but if we take them at their word, they are hopefully fixing things. But again, maybe I'm being optimistic. Maybe I'm being a bit of a idealist.
I think they're certainly trying. I think they have solved some of the problems, but I just think it's a bit like a football team. Sometimes with the same players, a change of manager just changes the form, and I think the country does seem to just be ready for a change. And I think,
well, yeah, I think they've been in power for a long time, haven't they? Even if it's not the same people, the party's been in power a long time. We saw the same with, Tony Blair, and we saw the same before that. And I think, it's the way it's always going to be. Regarding lower VAT, do you think it's the best mechanism to fuel business growth, or at least hospitality business growth?
I think it's different. I do think in fish and chips, most shops would not reduce the prices. It'd be trying to help them make more or retain the margin because of the increased costs. And I do think that's how it would be used. And I do think something on business rates is definitely needed because that stops businesses growing. So the good businesses don't want to take a second sight on because they're going to end up losing small business rate relief. They'll end up with rates in the second business, but 12 months later you get it in your original shop as well. So I think that's something that would help businesses grow, because there are some good businesses out there that would like to take the next step and take over another premises. But I do think VAT at 20% on hospitality is too high. It's just, we're seen as a cash cow, and I think government don't know what to replace it with.
Could you imagine, sorry to interrupt, could you imagine, like, look at the money that was made over COVID. Like, McDonald's, there was a queue for like an hour to get into a McDonald's. One thing that still baffles me to this day is that after lockdown, people queued 3 hours for a Costa coffee. I still can't get my head around it, because, I may not be able to make a good burger at home, and I definitely can't make a McDonald's burger or a Five Guys burger at home. But I can make a better coffee than Costa Coffee, like, all day long. Like, so to wait 3 hours, maybe they just wanted to be out of the house, who knows? But like, to wait 3 hours so could you imagine now giving McDonald's, which make record profits pretty much, like, to then say that they also get 10% VAT for argument's sake? Could that not be also seen, especially if like you mentioned, it won't be passed on to consumers? Could that not be also seen as a tax cut for the rich? Or not intentional, but it would end up being like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I said about the smoothing mechanism. I think that was probably an easier goal to go for, and I think that would have been an easier fix, to either increase the threshold to $250,000 to or $500,000 and take more smaller businesses out. I think that would have a good impact on small businesses, independent businesses. Maybe a tier, but the government won't want to take more admin costs on, so they don't want anything that's going to create more work. By raising the threshold, it would reduce the work, wouldn't it? Because there'd be less people in the VAT club. So that was where we thought we might get some movement.
If you so if you made it higher, the threshold, there'd be less people. You're right, but then doesn't that create a wider disparity? Because then you've got a problem where, for example, for argument's sake, your shop, you said it's a middle of the road shop. I think that's fair to say, that being, rude, because but then let's say a shop, even, down the road, that might be just in the next tier, then they would have to like charge or collect VAT and you wouldn't. And I wonder if the opposite would be better. And tell me your thoughts. Like, if there wasn't any threshold and everybody paid VAT from as soon as they can, whatever the figure is, and obviously at a lower rate, which would be nice, but I guess you can only deal with these things as they come. But I do wonder if a lower threshold would be better, because I know there was a poll on the groups not long ago, and I think one of the most popular options was a lower threshold.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's because the people that do collect VAT and pass it all on see an increasing unfairness there.
Yeah, well, definitely, and I think increasing the threshold by £5,000 probably benefited some sectors, but it didn't do a lot for us. It probably just enabled more businesses to appear to be under the threshold easier, but only slightly. But when you're talking to government, you've always got to remember they're talking to hairdressers, they're talking to mechanics. They've got all the businesses to think about. So it's not just about our sector. And I think if they brought the threshold down to 0 or 10,000, or it creates a lot more admin for HMRC, which they haven't got the time. But as things are going more digital, that is something that's more achievable. I think the biggest problem with that is it's not a vote winner, is it? So maybe if you get a government in with a much higher majority, so they've got the opportunity to do some unpopular decisions, they might have a go at some things like that, but they're probably unlikely to do it because the red tops will be all over it.
I think they're less likely to do it anyway. I think they're going to want to go for things that actually gets them claps rather than, and I think the fundamental problem is with VAT is, and I'd like your thought process on this, but I think consumers don't get it. And consumers, actually, I don't think a lot of people get it. I've written a lot of articles on VAT, and I get a lot of people message me and say that I've got it wrong. And I get their frustration behind it. I'm completely get it. Whereas where I'm writing the law, the legality of it, the technical aspect of it, but I think the unfairness to some people is so deep that they just see it as truth, but it's not truth. It is a consumer tax. And are we getting that message out to people enough? Are we trying to tell shops enough that this is a consumer tax? It isn't our money. What do you think the difficulties are behind that message?
I was on a Zoom meeting this morning with some of the board members, and that was something we talked about displaying the price plus VAT, and we don't let customers know, and it's not easy for us to see which businesses is VAT registered and which isn't, and how many of them are declaring all the turnover, and there's all these complexities. But I just think it's a very difficult subject for government to tackle. They don't have the solution there, and I think we try and present something, but if you change things for one sector, it's going to have an impact on another sector, and they've got their own needs and demands. So I just think we need to work as an industry. We've got to accept that it's there. Hopefully, something will change, but it's going to be a long process, and there's a lot.
I wonder if in time it becomes. With you mentioned it becomes going digital helps. So I wonder if in time we do start to see specific VAT regulations for a specific industry, like very specific. So, for example, out-of-home food, for example, 0 run-up, so 0 threshold, because you should all be doing it from day one. And I'm speaking theoretically here, but VAT rate is 10%. For argument's sake. And I think many people would probably be happy with something dressed like that, wouldn't they? Yeah. And you mentioned business rates. Again, there was a poll on the group, and I've been doing some research, and the poll says that the majority of fish and chip shop owners don't actually pay business rates because of small business rate relief. And I'm convinced that one of the biggest problems with business rates is the fact that so little businesses pay it. Because there's always a reason why. I'm a charity, and charities now are dressed as charities. They're competing for the same dollar as you and me. So. A charity gets 80% relief, a religious organisation 80% relief. Small business again would get a large relief or pay nothing. And then obviously, I think you could probably see someone like Weatherspoons or Sports Direct saying, "Oh, that's not fair," because they shoulder it. Because then on the other side, you've got the likes of Amazon and all them lot that don't pay the fair rate either. Yeah. So there is a broken system. However, shaking that tree probably doesn't do well for our industry because they'd end up paying some rates, if that makes sense. Yeah. So are you how do you balance talking about rates in these settings?
As I said, it's the conversations that I've had on business rates are within the other trade associations. We've been talking about ideas that we can take forward to government. For me, the system definitely needs changing because it is prohibitive for somebody to expand. As I say, I'm taking this other shop on, and I'm thinking, is it worth it? Is it not? And it could be the thing that makes that decision, makes that business viable. So I'd be happy to pay. So we should pay something, but it needs to be more distributed throughout the entire retail sector, doesn't it? I mean, they've got to find a way of taxing Amazon because they are trading. I can order something here and have it delivered at my shop within a couple of hours on some items. And the other thing that's not taxed fairly, I'd say, is supermarket ready meals, because there again, it's a meal that all you're basically doing is putting it in a microwave for 5 minutes, and they've got something similar to what they'll get from a takeaway. So they're competition for us as well. And I think it needs government to look at all these things and be brave enough to change systems and engage with the industries to try and get the system right.
So I've been saying for a while now to anybody that will listen, which isn't a lot of people, granted, that I'm convinced utterly that the way forward and what we should be saying to government is all of out-of-home food should be VAT rated. And the standard rate should be shifted from double figures to, hopefully, if I'm being very optimistic, single figures. So let's say 9% on a good day. Then, because I'm not being funny, Andrew, if you look at the two first words of VAT, it's value added. Yeah, we know it's a tax, but it's value added. So if you go to Tesco and buy a sandwich, I'm convinced that those two words kick in there. It's value added, isn't it? Because you could have made a sandwich at home, but you chose to go buy one. So the fact that, a sandwich at a convenience store or a Tesco or whatever is 0 rated baffles me. I know they'll say, but it's not hot. No, it's not hot, but someone made the sandwich for you. So if we look at something trivial like going to a takeaway, and not many takeaways sell this, but a slice of bread has no VAT, but a slice of bread with butter has VAT. Well, 2 slices of bread have butter, and they also have sandwich filling in between. So again, how is that not VAT rated? And I just think that the system's a little outdated. And I think for me, the argument would be, and I actually think the likes of Greg's and all these lot would be really supportive of this, believe it or not. Not that I can speak for them because I don't know anybody there, but my son goes to jiu-jitsu in Tamworth, so I just go to a Greg's and I sit there and I see the confusion that is just constantly wrought upon them. So if somebody gave them a simple system and just said, you know what, anything in this shop that's bought is 9%, it just simplifies their life. And you can see how Greggs are enjoying actually selling more hot food. Now, whether that'd be good for our industry, them selling more hot food, is a different debate. But they are actually selling more hot food. Their ambient counter is shrinking. I went to one in Cardiff recently, which was a bit bigger, but their counter for ambient product was small, and they had like 6 of these big heated displays, and you think, well, they're choosing to go into the same sector as us now. So obviously you've got to, you can't tax to stop them, obviously. But what I'm saying is that they would probably be more emboldened if the tax rate was lower for them.
Yeah. So I think again though, it comes down to, if you look at what happened with the pasty tax, public pressure got to government, and same thing with sanitary towels and things like that. Government don't want the negative press of adding VAT onto products that are currently 0 rated.
The problem is not that the problem that from what I've read on this. So it was Greg's jumped onto this public pressure thing and made it look like it was them that put the pressure on, but it wasn't. It was the Red Tops. It was the Sun. They pushed it and made Greg's the hero, which is whatever it is. But when you read the evidence, they've dropped the VAT on sanitary towels first to 5% and then to 0%. And I think they said that nothing's been passed on to consumers after 2 years of watching it drop, because it dropped it to 5 first and then to 0. Nothing's been passed on to consumers. So you could probably argue that Boots, the likes of Boots, Tesco and all them lot, have swallowed that. But also they'd probably argue that we had an increase on the other side. So we've both had a little bit of that. But the consumers had nothing. And now there's another campaign to make, what is it they're called? Suntan lotions, to make them 0 rated as well. But there's a big fight now saying, well, there's no point, because they're saying, but poorer people would have access to suntan lotion. And someone actually said it's cheaper if we give all the poor people free suntan lotion than dropping VAT on it. Because I think now people are starting to understand a little bit more about VAT, especially with inflation and so on. So not as much as, we'd like, but then if consumers understood more about VAT, is that also a headache? Sometimes you've got to be careful what you wish for, is what I'm saying. So we want consumers to know more, but then when they know more and they challenge us on it, we get peed off. So which way do you go? So VAT is always going to be tricky, but I do think the best argument is saying to these guys, 20% is too high, and the collection pool is too narrow. and it needs to be wider. And I think you'd see the likes of Greggs and all them lot with a simplified menu. They'd like that. But again, I'm sure they'd fight it. But I think they'd be quietly happy, because if it's in single digits, and all of a sudden, if the government's collecting from, I don't know, treble the amount of businesses,
it spreads the burden, doesn't it?
Spreads the burden, doesn't it? But you could see how. Well, also if they've got more multinationals and nationals, you could argue that they're going to see more of that rather than the mistakes or not mistakes that happen dealing with independents. So.
But then again, some of that will be offshored, won't it? So there'll be ways of VAT not, but corporation tax, things like that.
Yeah, but VAT doesn't move anywhere, does it? VAT is a British thing. So again, they still win. There's no way there's no illegal. Sorry, no. There's no real way for a legitimate multinational or national to not declare their VAT, because it's all based on their sales. So yeah, and honestly, all you got to do is go treat yourself to a coffee and a Greggs and just look how much hot food they now sell. Like I actually think we're looking at the wrong thing. We're all looking at the fact that as a trade, but people can buy an ambient product for whatever £1.39 without VAT. I don't think that's the problem. If I'm looking at it from a trade point of view, it's the fact that they're now doing a lot of hot food, and they're becoming competition on the other end. They're opening later, opening earlier, So
there's one near me that's open until 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night now, and people aren't buying sausage rolls at that time on the whole. It'll be pizzas and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So if we move on now, because again, there's a lot here, we're still halfway through, I reckon.
Oh, jeez.
But you go to a lot of Labour meetings, and there's that's from your Facebook account. I didn't have to go fishing there. Do you think, is it difficult to split your time between all parties?
We'd meet with whoever. The connection with the Labour things. I've had a couple of fundraisers that I've attended because I've been down in London and it's fitted with other meetings or events that I've had. So I go along and just want to hear what's being said. But no, we'll meet with everybody. As I say, I met with Kevin Hollinrake, who's Small Business Minister, the other week. Great guy. We have a lot of dealings with DEFRA and Department of Business. We're quite happy to work with any party. So
have you managed to get anyone on opposition to understand the things from your point of view?
We had a few. I had a meeting lined up with Seema Malhotra, who's the Small Business Minister, and she cancelled on me twice to go to an event for bigger businesses, which was very disappointing. I briefly met Rachel Reeves a couple of weeks ago. I didn't get a chance to get into anything, but at least we've had that point of contact, and we're going to start working a little bit more with Labour going forward. But the civil servants are likely to remain, and they understand it. And there's some great guys in the Department of Business that they get the sector and they want to support the sector. They want ministers to understand that they can work with independent businesses easy, and I think that's where we come in. So it won't really matter who's in power. I can't see there being much change if we do get a change in governments, apart from just maybe a little bit of a bounce because we've had a change, but because the money's going to be limited.
Do you think these civil servants are a bit like Yes Minister? You must have watched that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think Margaret Thatcher used to say that was very accurate on how Whitehall works. So, yeah, I think there's a little bit of that. Well, at the end of the day, they advise ministers. So, they've got the experience because they've been in that department for a long time, and they understand the industries that they represent. And obviously, they're going to advise ministers. So, yeah, I think they do have a fair bit of say in things.
Yeah. Did I tell you at the Fish and Chip Awards, I was just sitting in the bar, and I was just chatting to Gary Rosser, I think, and I look over, and my local MP was sitting like 2 chairs in front of me.
Yeah. I think you mentioned it, yeah.
Yeah. So I went over to him, and I've emailed this guy loads of times. So we've done the letters. I've said I'd like to meet you and discuss VAT, and never once did he get back to me. Like, not once. And again, I just don't know why, but maybe he doesn't like foreign last names. Probably thinks it's dodgy. But so I went over to him, and he said, "Oh, sit down." And we just had a little chat. And one thing that he told me, which was really interesting, and obviously it's completely anecdotal, but I've repeated it enough times to make it true. He said, I said, "Oh, you're here for the Kebab Awards?" He goes, "No." He goes, "We stay here because we've got a good room rate because it's Westminster," which makes complete sense. And I said, "Oh, why don't you go to the Kebab Awards?" He goes, "It's completely partisan." He goes, "If they invited everybody from all sides, we'd go." He goes, "But because they don't invite Lib Dems, Conservatives. He goes, we just won't go. He goes, I'd happily go and sit on, my equivalent from the other side. He goes, I've got no issue with that. We all get along for the most part privately, which they do. Like, they're not always going to be at each other. And he just said, and I said, well, maybe you should probably come to this awards one day, the Fish and Chip Awards. He goes, well, as long as it's not partisan. He goes, if we see that it's partisan, we just can't get involved. He goes, and he actually said, he goes, the guy that arranges it or organises it is a Labour councillor or something, and he goes, he's just very pro-Labour. And I thought, well, that, from my point of view, I just thought that's really damaging. As an organisation that's really only cozying up to one party, because you can see how, if there wasn't a change, let's say we go through this election and even by a small majority, the current government stays in. Let's just think like that for a moment. You could see how they're not going to want to help that organisation to some degree because it's seen as partisan. And I know it shouldn't work like that, but you could see how it's a risk.
To be fair to Ibrahim, I know him very well. He does work with both sides. He is a Labour councillor and he stood in the last election for Labour, so he is probably biased towards that side of it. Well, definitely biased towards that side of it. Yeah. But he does work with the Tories. I've attended a couple of events recently with him, and they've been sponsored by Tory MPs or Tory peers, and quite a few of them have said, I don't know why Labour's not selected him already, because if they don't want him, the Tories would have had him. If that's why. He's a great guy. But
I think for me, as an outsider to all of this, it shouldn't be about Labour and Tory. It should be about government and opposition, and that's it. And then when it flips, it's still government and opposition. And I think sometimes are we at risk of becoming, you're representing the fish and chip industry, so as much as you may have a personal belief. And I think you may have told me who it is and whatever, that's your personal preference. How do you keep that out of your professional preference? Well, not even a professional preference, but how you have a working relationship with government and opposition.
Yeah, well, I definitely do, because during COVID I was accused of playing for the other side by one of my friends. So yeah.
Did it make you feel queasy when someone?
No, not at all. Not at all. Quite happy to work with whoever, and I met with Conservative politicians and ministers, and the great guy Mark Spencer at DEFRA, knows his stuff. He's from a farming background. They're in power. You have to work with them, but you've also got to keep an eye on the future as well. And it doesn't look like we're going to get a change. And I think Labour have always been a party that not the best for small businesses, better for employees. And I think the work that Ibrahim does has highlighted the fact that small businesses are important to any political party. So I do think he's put some focus on small businesses. So that's useful.
If you're right, and I don't want to put a bet on it because you probably are, you might be right. People are ready for change, I'd imagine. If Labour get into power, which is highly likely, do you have concerns with the full fat approach, their words, to employment with full contractual rights from day one, easier union strikes procedures, which doesn't really affect chippies. Well, it affects everything else, though. Better sick pay entitlements, harder dismissal claims, and not to forget, making national living wage legal for all adult workers. That's over 18s. And this is off their manifesto. I've not gone digging. I've just copy and pasted from there with a bit of fluff. What are your concerns about that? As someone who's got a federation, or at least promoting the federation and the federation's needs, does any of that worry you?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's great to pay people better, as we said before, in the industry, but it's got to be affordable for the business. Giving people full rights from day one. I've had employees that have toed the line for a year or 2 years and then all of a sudden start doing sickies. Again, it's got to be practical. So it just goes to show why working with MPs is important, why we need trade associations to engage with MPs and just say, look, that's all well and good, but in reality, that's not going to work because. So I think if we do get a change in government, we're going to have to continue to keep raising our voice and raising our concerns and just try and modify any legislation or any decisions that come in. And things aren't likely to happen from day one, are they? They've got to get in there. They've got to find out where they're at.
They just seem... Well, they've sort of said that within the first 100 days, they're pushing that through. Now, obviously, I don't see them weakening it on this side of the election because they see that as a key pledge. and why would you? But I don't know. Like, I forgot the lady's name who I don't want to be typecaster, but
Is it Angela Rayner that?
yes, Angela Rayner. So she's saying within the first 100 days this is going to be done, and I think that alone is enough to scare a lot of business off, like, and a small business as well, because I think it's enough to make people not want to employ people. Like, yeah. And again, is that a barrier for growth? What's the point in having, all these things that we want? Let's just run through your list very quickly. Lower VAT, lower business rates, better energy costs, hopefully better food prices. What's the point in having all these things if everyone's afraid to employ people?
Yeah. Well, my mum used to say she'd love to have a kiosk so she's no employees, and it is. Employees are expensive. It's one of your largest costs in a business, so it's getting up there now. So we've just got to try and work with government and try and just point out that some of these things just aren't practical. You need to have a rethink. So I think that's got to be our strategy. I have had a couple of conversations with the other associations about it, and we're upping our engagement going forward. So I think I've got a meeting in about 2 or 3 weeks with NCAS, and we'll come up with a strategy. I actually met with a lady from the Ice Cream Alliance as well. She's keen to get involved, and I think working as a sector, we've got a lot more of a voice, and there is a desire from government and Whitehall to engage with us. So we've just got to keep doing it.
No, I get that, and I think it's just, for me, it's really worrying because I don't think a lot of people have picked up on that, especially in our industry. Like, they've really not mentioned any of those things, and I think a lot of people, and again, this isn't a reason for anybody to vote. This is not a call to action. This is just read the manifestos, and I think people are likely to vote another way purely because they're annoyed with the current way, and that is understandable. Like, I get that emotion, but in actual fact, if it says there in black and white and you vote for that thing and they say they get a majority, they see that as a reason to push along with those things. So I guess everything is all about how big the majority is with any party. And I
think the Tories are just hanging on and hoping things change over time, and like you say, they are showing a steady pair of hands. I think some of the announcements from Rishi Sunak last week about benefits, I think there are some common sense announcements in there, but it's only coming in the next Parliament, isn't it? Which they'll probably not be in power.
Well, there isn't a lot of time anyway, I guess. But I think that ultimately, I think one of the things they've been trying to deal with, and they haven't been as vocal as they should about it, is, and this is not me defending them, it just seems like this is what they're doing, is dealing with what Gordon Brown set up, which was working tax credits. And when you had working tax credits paired with high, freedom of movement, I get lorry drivers come to our warehouse all the time and they'll say, at least we're getting paid right now. And I was like, all right, why weren't you? And they'll say, because if we ever complained about not getting paid right before, they'd just say, well, leave, because we've got 3 Romanians ready to work and do the job. And it depressed the wage pool. And I think, and I think to some degree, we've got to admit that, yes, it was nice having all those people, but one of the things that we all liked is the fact that the wage pool stayed low. Like, we've got to be honest with ourselves, because I don't think people want to be honest. Like, and I understand why, but so I think a lot of people now probably are getting paid what they feel like they deserve, and obviously we've got to be careful that it doesn't become unfeasible. But I do think that the government is trying to fix this, where people are working full-time hours, not earning enough, and then everyone pays their tax, and then they divvy out what is called working tax credits. And I think maybe they just need to get that message right, because not a lot of people really know what's going on there. And I think, if people are working, at a full-time job at, say, Skipper's Fish Bar, you shouldn't also have to pay them out of another pool from your tax for working tax credits. And I think they just need to be a bit clearer about that. And I do worry sometimes that Labour will sort of slow down that and say, well, we're not going to go as fast now, but we've still got working tax credits to fall on. Again, because then we're double dipping, and I don't think that's right. I don't think business should have to pay twice.
Well, they say unemployment's low, but you've got 3 people doing one full-time job because most people are encouraged to do 16 hours and no more and no less.
Yeah.
And I've had countless employees over the years that fit into that. And if they work extra 1 week, they want to drop hours the week after, or they're off sick the week after. And there's a culture created by that system that I think needs to change. So I do think Rishi Sunak last week, the announcements were quite common sense. It was quite good. The problem is that you need brave government to all the things we've been discussing today. You've got to be a brave government to bring in a lot of these changes, haven't you?
I actually think if I'm looking at both of these parties, I actually think they're both just slightly off centre, except for the lady you mentioned. I forgot. I keep forgetting.
Angela Rayner.
Angela Rayner. Yeah, but obviously she's a lot more left than what the party is. But even that, there's only so much she can do. The party is pretty off centre. And so is the Conservative Party. They're both dancing around the middle, if I'm honest. So I don't think we're going to see this brave oomph from either side, to be honest.
No.
So yeah, moving on. Will we ever see the NFFF ball again?
I think with the problem with the ball, now we've got the awards. Obviously we rely on sponsorship. We don't charge people to enter the awards, and it is a big event. I think it's probably not going to be right to go to industry again and look for sponsorship for a celebratory night, a ball night that we used to have. That being said, and also the amount of work that's involved in putting the awards on, we are tied up. I mean, we started planning 2025 awards before we'd had this year's awards, so it's a massive project. So it's about resources in the office as well. That being said, you never know. Never say never, and they're always a good night. And anything where you get people together is always a good thing. But I think the calendar's getting more and more saturated these days. There's more. You've got KFE Ball, you've got Isle of Illy Open Day, Chippy Chat Ball's back. You've got events organised for different things, and it's difficult to fit everything in as it is. So another event might be too much.
This is just personal preference. I did like the NFFF Ball. I felt like it was a good way for you guys to round up certain things. You'd have a little speech and say, and even like the 2 Fish and Chip Awards I've been to, the talks were different. So they're doing different things, aren't they? One's rounding up and one's ramping up, I guess. And I think, and I always thought maybe the NFFF Ball was a low price point for guests, and not everybody's interested in going to an award, an award literally, because they may feel compelled, Well, we'd want them to feel compelled if they're going to the awards, if we're honest, but maybe they don't want to feel compelled. Maybe they're just happy meeting friends. And so, I don't know. I did think it was good because it was always like-minded people. There was a bit of prestige about it. Yeah, and also the other benefit was you'd usually bundle it with the AGM, annual general meeting. So, do people not miss coming to these things live, the AGM?
Well, I think we only got people at the end. People are interested in that side of the organisation on the whole. You've got the odd one, like Mark Drummond's usually one of them that are interested in the account side of stuff. But I do think having the ball and the AGM on the same, it got people to attend. Talking to the Ice Cream Alliance, they've got their awards the same day as their AGM. That probably won't work with us because obviously it's a bigger awards. But I do take the point that it was always good. Any occasion that you get people together is good for the industry, and that's why we always support every event. So like I say never, but at the moment, I can't see it coming back this year, maybe next year.
Yeah.
And one day I won't be in charge and somebody else will take over and they might want to do something like that. So
I guess.
Never say never.
Do you find that moving the AGM online, has that helped participation or not so much? Or can't you link it?
We always get enough members to hold the meeting, so that's always a positive. But yeah, because it's not the kind of thing that people are interested in, but because of the way the organisation's set up, we have to hold one. We've got to have it, but it's a formality more than anything.
So how? Well, you sort of mentioned it, but I had a question here, so I don't want to make out it came out of nowhere. But how do you deal with lack of apathy, non-joiners, people and organisations that choose not to rejoin, people that don't want to join AGMs? Because I guess there's apathy on both sides. There's apathy from those that don't join, and there's apathy from those that do join. So how? And this is not just with NFFF. This is with any trade organisation. How do you deal with apathy?
It's very difficult. For somebody who puts a lot of hours into it, and I have done over the years. And you know that. I know. We talk many times that we're both passionate about the industry, and that's why you do it. It is disappointing when you get people lapsing, and people that can afford to do it and should show support, and that is always a disappointment. But I think what we've got to do is get results. We've got to show that you've got to be relevant to the industry, which we've got some things in the pipeline, which I can't go into yet because obviously they're not announced yet. And two, you've got to start showing that you've got that influence. You are fighting for the industry, and that's something that we've probably done quite badly over the years because we are busy. We've all got our own businesses, and it's the communicating the work that we do to the members that's been a challenge. We've got a new website coming out in the next month or so. It probably might be 6 weeks. That's got a members area in there, so we can put a lot of stuff in there for members only, even documents, articles that can be members only. So legislation can go in there, things like that. We've got to reinvent ourselves quickly. We were doing it. We were starting from in the 80s, it was run by a lot of retired people, and even in the 90s, and we started having to modernise. Probably started about 20 years ago. The Entrepreneurs started modernising. My dad getting involved, and Greg Howard, and but with COVID, things have changed again, and you've got to, and then the cost of living, people are under more pressure. There's less people coming into the industry, so you've got less new members coming in. So at the moment, we rely on our steady membership, the ones that value us, that they've always been there. But we've got to keep trying to improve. We've got to make ourselves more relevant and keep that communication up.
With the NFF being so old, and also people probably don't realise that the word federation means that it was actually a lot of organisations that became one. Is there a lot of sort of like bylaws and internal legislation that you have to work towards that you can't just scrap?
Yeah, but you could do them all. You can take it to AGM and do it all en masse, and we've got the ability to do that. But again, it's a big project to rewrite the Articles of Association, which they're called, and it's. I think a lot of them are put together. I mean, we're 111 years old this year, so. Oh, sorry. Yeah. 111 years old this year. I just think. So there's a lot of rules that have been brought in over a lot of them came, I think, from Arthur Parrington, God rest his soul. He put a lot in. It's the way that people. I mean, they used to have a conference that was 4 days, and people used to, they had events for the ladies while the conference was going on in those times. That's the way it worked, and all that's fizzled out. I don't think people have got the time to attend things like that now, and I think people have just lost interest in that side of it. They want somebody to do the work for them or represent them, but they're not that interested in the day-to-day running of it, so they don't want to get that involved.
Yeah, I get that. So, with there being a couple of slots open for regional directors, firstly, what sort of person would you want to apply for that? Like, if someone's listening to this right now, we've just discussed apathy, they're probably thinking, I could do that. What sort of person are we looking for, or are you looking for?
You want people that want to put back to the industry. It's not about your business. You've got to be willing to give up your time to help others. And I think we've had some great ones. I mean, obviously David Miller's just stepped down. He was one that always cared when we were people going through the training school. He always held their hand afterwards, and there's quite a few that kept in touch with him going forward. So you definitely need somebody who cares about the industry that's got the time to put into it as well, and that's some of the issue because we're all time poor, and especially younger people. Which it'd be great to have more younger people on the board, but younger people are building a family, building a business, and so we've had a few. Craig Buckley joined us, but as his business has grown, his family's grown, he's had to step down. I think Craig will probably get back involved at a later time. So you need somebody who's got that ability, that time, but young ideas as well, because we don't want to go back to a stage where we've got retired fish fryers that don't understand technology and don't understand how to push things forward. Middle age with a bit of time, I think that's going to be the happy medium that we've got. Yeah. That's already built the business, that's not got that pressure and isn't interested in winning awards because none of the board members are allowed to enter the awards. So that's one thing we have to be careful.
So they've almost got to have achieved what they want to achieve, and then get involved, really, I guess.
Yeah, or be like me and have no aspirations. So I got invited. Well, I could never enter the awards, so I've never, because my dad was involved. So it's not something that's ever been on my radar, and it'd be lovely to have been able to do, but it's not something I'd ever do. So,
What was the thought process, if you don't mind sharing, behind sort of stopping the physical fish fries review, because it was around for 100 and how many years? 105 years or something? 104 years or
No.
no?
It should be 100 next year.
Oh, okay. So it's been around for a long time. What made you sort of, well, not you, what was the decision behind letting it go? Because I thought it was a great member benefit. And again, I enjoyed reading it as a physical magazine.
Yeah, it's one, the environmental side of it. It's a lot of waste. You get loads sent back when businesses have closed. You end up with loads of magazines left over. The cost of the postage, it was costing a fortune, and then office resources as well. To put a magazine together. Unless you're just putting a lot of press releases in it and it's old news, to actually write articles and bring in the advertising to cover the cost, we just think that the resources were better spent elsewhere. And by not doing the physical magazine, hopefully we can now start investing a little bit more in the content on the website, and we've got the smartphone app as well. I think people got the magazine and thought they remembered because the magazine landed on the doorstep, and didn't realise that we used to send it out to every member and a selection of non-members. So every member would get every issue, then a non-member might get 2 issues every year. And I do think people, how many people read a magazine now? They might flick through it and put it down. I think that a lot of the news, by the time it goes to print, can be out of date. So we just thought it was probably the best. It was right to just drop it. I think we'll probably do one next year because it would be the 100th anniversary. And we've actually got a copy of the front page from the first magazine, so we know the exact date. So we might try and get one out at that point. But it is, especially with taking the awards on, we've got less board members, less office staff. We lost one of our office staff that used to look after the magazine, and it just became a really big job that took us away from actually doing what we should be doing, helping the industry and training and things like that.
Yeah, no, I guess someone like me wouldn't see that because I was just used to getting it, and I think I guess nobody really sees the resources. You mentioned NCAS. One thing I noticed about that organisation, but which has a very different structure to yours, very different. Because I think if I'm right, they're just a business, aren't they? Yeah. So I noticed, because I'm in some of these trailer groups and mobile groups, and everyone says, look, just get NCAS. And that doesn't always, like we've spoke about apathy, I don't always see that. And that's not no fault of your own, it's just a very different thing. But one thing I noticed that they seem to sell themselves very well on the other end. So whereas you guys are trying to push yourself to like members, which obviously you have to, what NCAS seem to have done very well is push themselves to EHOs and events companies. Is there something similar that the likes of you guys could do here?
Well, NCAS have got an EHO on the payroll as well, an ex-EHO on the payroll who's come working for them. I think with the events side of things, it plays into that because they've got the handbook that I think it dynamically generates all your safety records and all your documents that you need when you do a festival. So it helps for these mobile businesses. It really does help them get in there. It ticks the box for the festival organisers, and so that's why I think it's important for a mobile unit. But no, they're very good. I think during COVID they got well involved with government, realised they had to change quickly, and they've adapted. I think they've got something like 7,000 members, but there's again, they've got to constantly be reinventing themselves. They've got to constantly be looking at their offering and trying to make it relevant. The industry's changing. I know that events organisers are charging more money for pitches and making operators buy consumables and products from them, which is at an inflated price, and so they're going to see a number of events operators dwindling, I think, over time, and so they've got to keep relevant as well, and that's why it works well working with them. We do talk quite often. We can work on initiatives together. And I just think it's important that the entire sector has that line of communication, that we're always communicating and sharing ideas, a bit like shops share ideas. I think the associations can share ideas and not duplicate resources and not duplicate work. I think that's the future for us all.
One of the things that they do really well, I think, is this. I don't know if it's still called this, but it's that primary authority. And I know one of my customers, he's got 4 vans, like Indian Fusion, and he loves that. Like, and I wonder if there's something there for our industry. I don't know what it takes to set it up because I don't really get involved with that sort of
We actually had it. We had it with the QA. We had primary
so it
authority.
was linked to the quality award.
Yeah, so because
accreditation. Sorry.
Yeah,
sorry. I do it all the time.
But I was set up for things like Tesco's. So they'd have one authority that looked after all their sites basically. So if they had a health inspection in one site, they can then take it to the primary authority and they work to the standard that's been agreed between Tesco's and that authority. So they can overrule, say, an EHO in London that's not the primary authority.
Know.
So yeah, it does work, but it was only for QA. And I think if we were doing it, we probably needed to do it a bit more broader. We had a good relationship with I forget which I think it was Bradford that we worked with, Bradford Council, and we had a good relationship. And then the personnel moved on, and it kind of fizzled out a little bit then. But it is something we look at, and we've talked to NCAS as well about sharing their primary authority as well.
I think anyone listening to this would be like, wow, like, because again, if it helps them, but I guess they've still got to follow the processes, because if an EHO came in and they weren't following the processes based on this in this system, they'd probably be in for trouble.
That's why it worked with the QA, because you've got certain best practice standard, whereas we've not got that for the wider industry, and that's something that maybe we need to put in place over time, that people have something to work to. But again, you've got EHOs in Wales that seem to be a lot more strict than they are in other areas. So it's...
How is the QA going, the quality accreditation? Let's get that right from the beginning, because obviously, how many years is it now that NFF's had it? It's about 6-7 years? Or?
No, it's longer than that. It was my dad presented the first one, so so that was 2011. So it'd be 13 years. We've probably seen a slight decline during COVID. A bit like everything, it changed everything. But it's important to have that standard, that best practice standard. And Leslie Graves does a lot of the inspections, and I know she's busy with it. I think she might have one today. So it's like, there's plenty. There seems to be more coming in, but we've been probably ready for another push from our side. We linked it with MSC, and we've been in talks with MSC about trying to get that going again.
What slowed that down? Because that was the thing, wasn't it? You two were like thick as thieves, and I'm speaking very commonly. But you had a good thing going. You did the accreditations for them, and so why did that sort of fall by the wayside?
I think with MSC, the cost of getting the group going up again, we've got to have so many audits. Again, it's about time resources in the office, and how much work would be in it for how many people would be in the scheme. And, is that fair to our other members if we're spending so much time getting that going? But we are in talks with MSC again now. It's important. I always find MSC useful. Whenever we've got an environmental story in the media, you've got the silver bullet answer, and it did work that way until Seaspiracy, and that kind of took away from it a little bit. I know they had to handle it the way they handled it, but I do think that did a little bit of damage at the time. But what they're doing is good, and I just think, a bit like primary authority, it's a model that's designed for a bigger business trying to be an adapt to a small business.
Yeah,
and that's where it falls down. I think MSC probably need to look at that for us a little bit.
I think one of the weaknesses they have is where people use their logo. They go on about how strict they are, but then people use it and they don't pursue it. And I think to some degree we see that with Quality Award and the quality accreditation that it became, is that we all say how strict it is, and then people put it on and no one really does anything about it. I know you guys would probably press on a bit more than MSC. MSC probably wouldn't as fast as you guys would, but I know. There's so many shops that have MSC logo in their thingy now, and they don't buy an MSC fish. Maybe I'm sure that it's an accredited product, and I think that also shows the complexity in how they promote their. I've said this to Lauren and George and whoever I've spoken to there. Like, I think they need to simplify their fee structure.
Yeah.
Because otherwise people are going to keep doing what they do.
And take the work out of for us setting up the group, we've got to visit every site in advance of it, which is a lot of time and a lot of expense.
So if someone like Fish and Chicken had it, for argument's sake, you'd have to go to all 40-something sites?
Well, setting the group up, we'd have to go to every site that's going to be in the group, and then you've only got a variance of a certain percentage each year. Otherwise, you've got to inspect all them as well. So it then becomes one, it's not very environmentally sound if you're driving around all over the country to do this, and I just don't see why we can't make use of technology for something that's not that in-depth an audit, really, because it's about checking where the fish is from.
So I told them years ago, sorry to interrupt that, I told them years ago that they needed to implement a blockchain, and I'm convinced of it, because every step down the line, you'd know exactly, and I don't mean like crypto money, I mean just the blockchain technology, you know exactly all the transactions, where it ends up, and I think that makes complete sense. But again, at the time, they probably did not want to consider it, or or they didn't understand it. But I do think that if there was a scanning system in place or a blockchain, and that way you know exactly all the transactions, where they ended up, where they went, who had it, who didn't have it, what boat did it go from, what supplier did it go to, what shop did it go to after the supplier. All of these things are constantly being monitored. They'd know, and they could probably have a better fee structure if they did that. But I'd also guess there's some implementation costs.
Yeah, and also not all the fish that arrives at shops is assigned to that shop, if you know what I mean. So,
well, yeah. So, do you see physical inspections, on-site inspections, coming back for quality accreditation?
We've discussed it, and quite recently, and I do think some shops would value that. So it's something that we can look at offering. We'd have to build our network of assessors up again, but there'd have to be a premium to that. Things have got a lot more expensive travelling around, and but I do think it's something that, peace of mind, and it feels more of achievement when you get through the scheme. The Zoom works really. I mean, for the awards assessment, what you see on a Zoom is unbelievable. People don't realise what you can pick up on a Zoom meeting.
I'm going to be a critic there, though, because I still think there's a lot you don't see, and I think that because I had inspections from Mike Pilley, and I know that is an extreme example, but I'm convinced you'd still see a lot more on site. But again, you guys have to make that decision, I guess. There's a lot to balance there, isn't there?
It is. I mean, you've got to, if you're building up a network of assessors, you've got to utilise them. Otherwise, they get rusty and they're not as effective when they do get an assessment. So, we've got to have a big push. So if we can use those when we've got MSc as well, and
I guess if
for the awards, and then it makes sense.
I was going to say, if you did have this probably could allow a comeback for the awards. Maybe getting some physical inspections done early on. You mentioned earlier that you don't charge for the awards. I'm not averse to that, and I think anybody listening to this, I'd be open-minded. You should be open-minded for that, because I think if it helps you guys pass off some of the costs and invest into the practices, and I think, obviously to some people nothing is better than free. However, there is also a cost of good value, and if it was 50 quid, 100 quid. I can see it just helps you guys loosen the belt a little bit. Doesn't mean splash it about, but it means, a well-considered, balanced approach to having a fee. I would say to anybody listening to this, just don't be offended. Open your mind to it, because I think that, you have to pay for audits. We're building a factory, we're having an audit, we have to pay for it. They're not going to come out of their own goodwill, and they're not going to do it by Zoom either. They're coming to see the place. So, I think that people need to sort of get their head around that, some things need paying for, and, because it's a lot of burden for an organisation to carry for it to be free, in my opinion. And I shouldn't really be giving my opinion, but I just thought I'd weigh in on that, because I know you might say, but people might be averse to paying. And I get that, but I think they need to stop being averse to paying, because you need to invest in your business. And
I think the awards are one thing, and I wouldn't like to charge for those, but for the QA, I do think there is a value there. Having somebody inspect your business, check your paperwork, make sure you're complying with everything. That there is a value there, and it's a good assessment before you enter the awards as well. So I'd encourage everybody that's looking at the awards to get the QA anyway, and just get that peace of mind before you go into it, that you're ready.
I'd imagine that these days you don't use the offices as much as you did pre-COVID. We're doing this online. There's meetings you do by Zoom with your team and so on. How have you managed to use the building as efficiently as possible? Or how to better utilise the use of the building? Because obviously it's there, it's a fixed asset. So what ideas do you have around that?
been investigating turning upstairs into flats because we don't really need the stairs are very steep anyway, so they definitely need changing. So I've noticed myself from 10 years ago, it's taken me a lot longer to get up them. So they are hard work, but we don't need the building as big as it is. So we've got option. We could sell the building and then try and relocate. But then you're into finding somewhere that would suit our needs with the training facilities and office space, and and if you need to put gas supply in, it could be quite expensive. And we're already there, and we don't get many complaints from the neighbours. But no, the office are only in 1 day a week, and they work from home the rest of the time. But it's always there for us to use. So I was in there Monday. I had to leave because I had a doctor's appointment, so I was only there Monday morning. But it is useful to have a facility there, and we'd struggle to find a facility that's. You could buy an old fish and chip shop and do training from there, an office above, but it wouldn't have the space to teach people that we can have 12 people in the training. Not that it's that busy at the moment, but you can have that many people in the training facility, and then we've got a lecture room as well. No, it is the perfect building for us, but it's probably got one floor we don't need. So if we can convert that into flats, we've got to explore it with the council, get some plans drawn up, and then try and get planning. Then that could be a regular income stream for the NFFF, and also it uses the building. It's pointless having empty space, isn't it?
What happens if the situation flips? So what happens if, because I see a lot of businesses now trying to get people back into the office. What happens if, let's say, you do that, and then 5 years down the line, actually, people need to work at the office again?
We've still got the space, though. We've got a lecture room, we've got the boardroom downstairs, we've got a big reception area which could be shrunk down, and you could extend the office space. So I think we've got enough. We've got everything we need downstairs, apart from the office space are built upstairs. So we just need to move them down. So there's plenty of room. It's a big floor area. So
others have mentioned this, and I think it's not a bad idea, and I've probably been a proponent to some degree, but I see one side of it. Seeing the awards hosted in different cities. So, for example, not far from you, Media City, you've got ITV, BBC, Doc 10. Doc 10's a TV studio. They're based in Salford Keys. I don't think that I've got a perfect solution here. But what are the downsides to my very perfect, easy solution there?
I think there's not as much of a cost saving as you'd expect. I think wherever you hold it, you're round about. It might be a slight premium for London, but there isn't the massive cost saving. It's not going to be half the cost to put the event on. London's great for transport networks. We've got people flying in from Iceland, Norway, Faroe Islands. We had somebody travel from Vietnam this year and America for the overseas category. So London's great for that. And there's something special about it. I know Hennigan's, where the first time they went to the awards, that was the first time they'd been to London. There's something about London. It's exciting. And I do think it adds a little bit of glitz and glamour to it. Yeah, it's even though I visit quite a lot, as you do, I still love visiting London. It's vibrant. It's exciting. It's a good afternoon out. It's not a very good night out, but it's a good afternoon out. I always say about London.
Yeah. So I guess there's that capital draw, isn't there?
Yeah. It's and the venue. We've not finalised the venue for next year yet. We're still in talks. We might be there and be on our own. We might share it again. We've not decided that. We have looked at other venues as well, but it's great. I mean, from King's Cross and from Euston, it's dead easy to get to. You're right across from Parliament, so it's great for that photograph afterwards. There's 1,000 odd rooms in the hotel, so it's big enough to accommodate everybody. And the actual venue space, apart from it being in the basement, which you've not got a phone signal, it's got free Wi-Fi though.
Wi-Fi.
So it worked fine for the live vote that we did in the room. So that's what I was worried about. It is a great room. It's a great venue. So I do quite like the Park Plaza, but they do know they're a great venue, so they do know how to charge.
Well, no, I bet they do, and they probably think they're cheap. But I thought you'd be a bigger proponent of this levelling up. See, you're failing. Well,
it'd be handy for me in Manchester, wouldn't it? It's a train journey, so
I guess. And on the flip side, if you did choose Manchester, they'd say, he's only done it for himself. Yeah, so you never win. And
we do get accused of being a northern organisation. People said it about the finalists. There's a lot from the north. Well, that's because more shops are in the north and more entered. My answer to that is get entering. You know, it's all you need is a best practice. The winners of takeaway and the winners of restaurant were down south, weren't they? Wales and Glastonbury. So it's not, there's no bias there, but there's just more shops up here, and sort of encourage everybody just to enter.
Yeah, no, exactly. And on the home stretch, in episode 2 of the Ceres podcast in 2018, in December, you mentioned that you won't be doing this forever. You've also said this in this episode as well, actually. I didn't have to go that far back. You know, your business must need you. That must take a knock on. You know, the fact that you're not in your business every day. You know, like today, we've been doing this for nearly 2 hours. You've been other calls. Do you often wonder what it's like not doing it every day anymore? Have you got a succession plan in mind?
It's definitely not healthy for one person to be there too long, and I have no desire to keep the role that long. I do think with some of the work I'm doing at the moment, I've probably got a little bit more to do and keep that continuity. But no, I've looked at my vice presidents, and whenever they're ready to take it, then they can do. You know, if anyone wants to step up, it's up to them to do it. And I'd still hang around to support it. But I think one of the things that worries people, I do put a lot of time in it, and because I've not got kids, it's easier for me to do that. I've now, for last year, I've got a girlfriend in Leeds, so my time's a little bit more taken up with that. And I spend a lot of time driving over the M62, so it's so yeah, I feel the time pressure's there a little bit. But no, I'm happy to carry on as long as I think it's right and people think it's right. But I'm quite happy for somebody else to take charge, and if they want me to still support them, I would do, and that offer's there. We've had quite a lot of upheaval in the world, and I think COVID probably changed people's focus. I think more people went back into being more hands-on in the business, and that's changed the industry a little bit, and the amount of free time people have got. And I think as time goes on, we'll see some candidates coming through that'll want to do it. But as I say, I'm there to support them as much as they want. I'm never going to just leave it, but I also won't interfere if they don't want it to. You know, when somebody else takes over, they've got to do it their way, haven't they? So
yeah. And you know, really, I wanted to give you the opportunity towards the end of the podcast. If anybody's made it this far, and I hope they have, because you're the president of the federation. So, you know, for anybody listening to this, why should they be a member of the NFFF? You know, have a sales pitch, go for it. Usually we avoid doing this during the podcast, but this is your moment.
It's an organisation run by members for members. We understand your industry, which we're talking about the awards that we do know what the key issues are, and we can tailor the awards to try and raise those standards. We know what's going on in the industry, and we know what's affecting our businesses, and we talk to a lot of other shops. And we can represent you with government, and by being together, we've got more of a voice. And I think, as I've alluded to, working with the other associations as well, we can represent. I mean, there's other organisations that would take fish and chip shops as members, but they've got a broader church of membership. You haven't got the specialist industry knowledge that we've got, and they've got to ask for things that benefit all the members rather than one specific sector. And I do think fish and chips is one on its own, and I think we deserve having our own voice. And the more people that are a member of our organisation, the better. And not only being a member, but get involved. Actively get involved. And if you've got any ideas, send them in. And if you want to assist on projects, get involved in it. That's how we get board members. Be careful what you volunteer for. People warned me at the start, and it's definitely true. But it is an open door for people to get involved. It's your organisation, and by being involved in it, and just membership's the first stage, but actively involved in it, you can shape the industry that you're in. And I think that's something that, is very special. We've been around 111 years, as I said earlier on, and whether we'll be here for another 111 years because the world changes so much. But I do think it's important that we've got that body that can just represent us, and also that focal point for media. I get, I don't know, probably half a dozen media inquiries a week. Some of them come to fruition, some don't. I had German TV at the awards that they wanted to go and film in Grimsby, and I talked them into going to Whitby. So they ended up filmed at the awards and then went to Whitby. But we get all sorts of student journalists getting in touch, and I always give them a bit of time because they're the future journalists, and we've got to keep them live for the industry in the future, and they'll look back at us fondly when they get a story about fish and chips. So I think that's an important role we play, just being that focal point for the industry, that government, that media, that D-Day is coming up. We're involved in the D-Day 80th anniversary on National Fish and Chip Day as well, and next year we've got VE Day. So there's two events there that have come about because they've reached out to us because there is that focal point. Otherwise, who would they contact? Just individual shops. So I do think it's important we've got a body there, and it'd be nice to have more members. It always would be. But for me, I hope people understand that we do it in our own time, and we do it because we care about the industry.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, on that note, I'd like to thank you for your time.
I think that could be a record one, could it? That
probably could be. It could be. We had a lot to go through because it's been a while since you've been on, and a lot has happened, and a lot is going to happen. With the elections and so on. So I want to thank you for taking some of these hard questions. And I do that because I respect your time and I respect the listeners' time, because they're going to invest time to listen to this. So they don't want anybody to feel like they've just got an easy ride. And also, I feel like these are hard questions because we're in harder times. So, hopefully we can have you on again during the election, and hopefully we can break down some policy and, and hopefully use this platform to decipher what the hell's going to happen.
Yeah, who knows? It's going to be an interesting year, I think, but let's hope we get it'd be nice to see some growth out there.
Interest, on top of the last 4 years of interesting years. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, look, it is a fun time to be alive. I know it might be difficult, but, there's a lot going on, which is always good.
You could never have written it, could you? You'd never thought we'd go through what we've been through in the last few years, and that makes you wonder what's next, doesn't it? But it makes you more resilient. You don't learn how to sail on a calm sea, and that's, when you're in business, you've got to adapt to these things, haven't you?
I agree. Well, on that note, mate, have a great day.
Cheers, man. Thank you.